Lieutenant Colonel Herbert Maxwell Sobel Sr. was born on January 26, 1912 in Chicago, Illinois, to a Jewish family. Herbert grew up in Chicago before he left to attend the Culver Military Academy in Indiana. Sobel was a clothing salesman after he attended military school. After his time in Indiana, Herbert returned to his home state to attend the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign. He went on to graduate from U of I in 1934. 5 years later, the outbreak of World War II occurred as Germany invaded Poland and the United Kingdom and France subsequently declared war on Germany. From 1939 to 1941, Germany and the Axis alliance controlled much of continental Europe, and the United Kingdom was the only allied force fighting the Axis. The United States chose to be a neutral country for the beginning of the war, as they did not want to get involved in European affairs again, as they did in World War I. The US joined the Allies when, in December of 1941, the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. Immediately after, the US declared war on Japan and Germany. Many American men enlisted or were drafted for the war.
In World War II, Herbert Sobel volunteered for the paratroopers and was eventually assigned as the commanding officer of the Easy Company of the 2nd Battalion of the 506th Parachute Infantry Regime of the 101st Airborne Division. His job was to train the paratroopers, which was a tough job because the paratroopers were elite soldiers who had to be trained more roughly than any other soldiers. Many of the men he trained said negative things about him, and he was portrayed this way in the novel and television adaptation of Band of Brothers by Stephen E. Ambrose. However, some of his cruel and excessive punishments actually served a purpose. For example, sometimes he would make his soldiers dig 6-foot deep holes, and then fill them up again as a form of punishment. This could later come in handy when that soldier would have to dig a foxhole that deep to save his life. Also, by punishing a soldier for having rust on his rifle, that soldier would remember to keep it clean, because rusty rifles don't work, and that could be the difference between life and death on the battlefield. He was harsh and strict because he wanted his men to be well prepared for war. Consequently, Company E was the best company of the 2nd Battalion of the 506th Parachute Infantry Regime. Unfortunately, he was not very admired by his men, and they saw him as an incompetent leader. He didn't know how to read maps, which is a critical skill for a commanding officer. Also, some of his quick decisions didn't work out for the best. His men did anything and everything short of murder to try to get him removed from his position from the E Company. One of his men imitated the voice of Major Horton, who was Sobel's commanding officer, and ordered Sobel to cut the fences of farmers in Wiltshire during a cross-country march. This was a big faux pas for Sobel, considering that Major Horton was on leave in London during that time. However, the worst prank pulled on Sobel was during a field exercise, where medics were practicing making splints and casts. Sobel was put under a real anesthetic. Then the medics made a real incision to simulate an appendectomy, wrapped him up in bandages, and left. This may not seem like a big deal because these are the kinds of things that happen in war, but Sobel was basically violated. He could have died under the knife without ever knowing. Eventually, Sobel was removed from command and replaced by Thomas Meehan, who would later be replaced by Sergeant Winters. He still fought in Normandy on D-Day and received the Combat Infantry Badge, which was and still is awarded to a soldier who performed their duties while under fire. But he did so without Company E. He was later reassigned to command the Chilton Foliat Jump School. Also, before the Company E invaded Netherlands, he was assigned to the 506th Parachute Infantry Regime to serve as the S4 logistics officer for Operation Market Garden, an operation which the 101st Airborne Division played a vital role in. They managed to capture 4 of the 5 bridges that they were assigned to and landed in their landing zones with much more precision than the paratroopers who landed on Normandy on D-Day.
After World War II, Sobel married. He was 9 years older than his wife. At first, she worked as a nurse in a hospital in Italy during the war. Later, she began working at the Heinz Veterans Affairs Hospital in Chicago. Sobel and his wife met while he was visiting a soldier who was wounded. They had 3 boys and 1 girl who unfortunately died after birth. Sobel's wife was an attractive woman with blonde hair and blue eyes. Her family were dirt farmers from South Dakota. She was Catholic and Sobel was Jewish. Because of this, His family never truly accepted her. During that time, Jewish families weren't generally open to their sons marrying Catholic non-Jews. Sobel spent a lot of time with his sons playing sports, especially baseball. He always addressed his boys by their nicknames he had given them. Their nicknames were Footsie, Inky, and Skooky. When the boys were younger, if they had behaved during the day, then they were given the honor of doing 20 minutes worth of exercise with their father. The exercises done were push-ups, sit-ups, and jumping jacks. If the boys hadn't behaved during the day, they were not allowed to do exercise with their father. During the height of the Vietnam War era, Sobel became distant from his son named Michael. The younger son was a diabetic, so he was exempt from the draft. The older brother got a low draft number and enlisted in the Coast Guard. Michael had different political views than his father, which hurt Sobel. Michael was involved in unpopular political groups. Student riots were occurring all over America, causing him to stay low for a while, which was why it took 3 days to track down Michael to deliver the message that Sobel had attempted suicide. When Sobel shot himself with a small caliber pistol, it severed his optic nerves, causing him to become blind. Sobel's wife believed he had cancer but wasn't willing to get tested, which she believes was the reason behind the suicide attempt. After the suicide attempt, Sobel was moved to a Veterans Affairs assisted living in Waukegan, Illinois, where he lived out his remaining years. None of Sobel's immediate family were present when he died in 1987. A memorial service was not held for him. Sobel's sister phoned Michael's mom days after he had died. Michael believes he was able to reestablish part of the relationship with his father before his death and even after his death. He gave his father a gold coin, which was a small memento of a trip he had made to Guatemala, and some money for his personal needs. He believes Sobel was closer to him than ever. In 2002, Michael was an improv guest speaker at the Easy Company reunion in Arizona. One of the men's sons hugged him and said, "My father told me that if I ever had the honor of meeting you, to let you know that it was because of your father that I'm alive today."